Oh, this is perfect. I feel like I'm like a nightclub act already. I want to thank everybody coming out. This is a big night, certainly for the Fishtown Business Improvement District, to work with our partners at the Chamber of Commerce to really talk about how we can work together, what are your concerns as business owners, and how we can try to make change in our city, and also to welcome Mark Goldstein, of course, Mr. Business 101. Love you, buddy. I just want to thank, especially as a longtime chamber member, first as the bid, which is, and on my last job, one of the reasons that really drew me to it was the focus that this organization started of building from the neighborhoods up. As we know, Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has its own personality, its own vibe, like all of you. And how we build in Fishtown, how we grow here, and thankfully because of all of you, we do, might be a little different than in Mayfair or in Chestnut Hill. And they're taking the time at things like this. What is?
She's from there. She's
This is going to go well. What other words make you giggle? So with us, so I want to thank, first off, Chellie Cameron, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and Ken Anderson, President of Civic Affairs, I believe, and whose daughter lives in my building. You know, you've gotten to meet some of the other Chamber folks here. We appreciate you all, and I appreciate you for taking the time out tonight. You know, this is something really as grassroots as you can get. You are going to get to tell us what you need, and we're going to figure out how to get it for you. You know, certainly since I've been here when the bid started in January of 2020, change and this corridor going through change is a mild understatement. You know, we went from the problems of the pandemic and shifting the focus of our organization. I'm not even you. To making sure that our businesses had the resources they need to stay afloat, to then getting back to what a bid does, helping to plan for the long-term growth, not just now, but 20, 30, 40 years from now. How can we be involved in capital projects, building, things like that? And then it changed again as we go through this year of public safety. It's certainly a concern throughout the city, and we are not immune to that. Our friend Scott Nistico, who runs our Fishtown Ambassadors this year, they are a great group, and it was something we pivoted to much quicker than we thought we were going to have to, but we always knew we wanted it to be a reflection of the Fishtown Kensington communities. Caring, helpful, and that's why we always say they're not a security team, they're a help squad. And they made a world of difference during these several months. We're looking forward to growing that. But that all came from input that we received. So before we get to the Q&A, I want to let Chellie and Ken say a few words, and then we're going to get started. So, Madam President.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for spending a little bit of your evening with us. I really appreciate your time more than anything, because that's one of the things that when you give it, you don't get it back. And I know how precious it is. I know everyone has families or puppies or whatever it is you have at home. And again, just really appreciate you being out here tonight. I'm Chellie Cameron. I've been in the role of President and CEO of the Chamber, the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia, all those words, for about 7 months. So I am way better at being an airport director than I am at running a Chamber of Commerce. I was the CEO of PHL and PNE for 6.5 years and spent more than 30 years in aviation, starting in the Air Force and then working at airports. So I know that business a whole lot better than I do chambers, but they have a lot in common when you really dig down into it. At an airport, at PHL, for example, there are 21,000 people who work there, and about 1,000 people worked for me. And the airport was responsible. We owned and operated and built and maintained all of the facilities. So runways, terminals, roadways, all of that. And everybody else were tenants. And so you don't get results at an airport by directing people to do stuff. Well, you do sometimes. But mostly you have to do it through influence. And when you're at a chamber, it's the same kind of thing, right? We try to bring people together to ultimately serve our members' needs, but ultimately to influence results in the city. So a couple things. When I took the job, I pledged 3 things, and I think it's worth repeating. The first is that I wanted to get to know our members, all of our members, no matter the size, that I would operate with transparency. I think if you're a member of our chamber, you deserve to know what's going on, and that I would also operate with accountability and results. And so we are well on our way to achieving those different things. And this meeting tonight is really to do the first, which is to meet some of the members that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So 3 pillars that we work on that I want to mention briefly, and then I'll stop because I don't want to stand up here talking the whole time. But our chamber, your chamber, is different than what it used to be. And the way I say it is, it's not your grandfather's chamber anymore, not my grandfather's chamber. There's a picture above my desk when I took the job that actually I took a step back when I saw that picture. It's of about 30 or 35 old white men. Nothing against old white men. I'm married to one. And I love him dearly. But sitting around a table in tuxes in the Bellevue, and it said Chamber of Commerce something something dinner 1933. And I almost took out my tube of lipstick and wrote not my chamber on that picture, but I thought, no, you know what, we need to show how we are much more representative today in business of the community that we serve and reside in. And it takes all of us to ultimately make a difference. So the chamber is focusing on 3 things that I would call impact areas. The first is creating a better business climate. So think advocacy, lobbying work. We are leaning in big time into the electoral politics cycle right now. So if you've been living under a rock, you may not know that we have mayoral and city council elections coming up in 2023. The rest of you probably know all about that. The chamber feels that it is vitally important to make sure that candidates who are running for office in Philadelphia and the region, because we're a regional chamber, understand what it is that's important to business. And we can sum that up with one really very simple statement. It's all about inclusive economic growth, creating the climate to grow businesses and create jobs. And that's what all of you do. Now, there's a whole lot more behind that, and I'm happy to answer questions if you want, but I think that's something that it's important that you know that we're leaning into. Second big area is really doing everything that we do through an inclusive growth lens. So we have a number of initiatives underway that are helping to grow Black and Brown-owned businesses, helping to get large businesses married up with small businesses for the work, so that they can ultimately walk away with contracts, those sorts of things. It's all about making sure that we are doing things in a very inclusive way. And that's really Ken's area. He can talk a lot more about that. And then the third area is economic competitiveness, making sure that we are working to attract additional businesses and look at the workforce issues that we have in Philadelphia to make sure that businesses can thrive. So, I don't want to keep talking, but those are 3 main areas, and I'm happy to take questions later on, but we are really thrilled to be here tonight to meet you. This, to me, is what it's all about. I'm going to do as many of these as it takes to get around the city to ultimately hear from you and the things that we as your chamber can do to better represent you as our members. So that's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Chellie. Thank you, Chellie, for your leadership. I'll start there because that is key. And I think 7 months, it may as well be 7 years because you've done some things in the short term that it's taken a long time for others to do. So we thank you. We, when I say we, collectively, our region. Thank you, Mark, for always being there, present. Literally and figuratively, in terms of always willing to roll up your sleeves and help for the greater good, especially in this area, in this improvement district. And then finally, Skip, thanks for hosting us. Great venue. Absolutely. when and I'll try to be brief in my remarks, but a couple of my colleagues know it's dangerous to give me a microphone. And we got a camera too? What? So anyway, I just want to start by something that I just heard of, the word community. And when I define community, or my definition is really, it's people working together. We are the community. And so part of what I do, as Chellie described, is it's all things neighborhoods, it's all things community, it's all things us. A little bit about myself. So I'm not originally from Philadelphia. I'm from Indiana, but I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. One of my first jobs was working at Anderson's restaurant. My name is Ken Anderson, by the way, so if that tells you. And my first job was really bussing tables. So my dad and my uncles had a small restaurant in the neighborhood, and I was responsible for bussing tables. Now, this was back in the day when, I had to scrape the garbage off the plates into a bucket, take it to a barrel, and burn it. You all are too young to remember that, but I was burning garbage, and the grease was like, I could tell you stories. But I say that to say to you that I understand, or I really can connect around entrepreneurship and small businesses and what it takes and all the nuances that exist in order to make a business successful. It's a lot of hard work, it's gratifying, but you need support. It goes back to that community. So fast forward, I've done a few things professionally, both for-profit and nonprofit, but I will say that my work with the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia has been the most impactful because I get to impact community. So I just wanted to share that with you. In my role, I'm Vice President of Civic Affairs, and as Chellie said, we've got a few pillars that we focused on that we know that we're on the right track to making sure that we're serving and that we're investing in local businesses. Because again, businesses are the economic engines that drive not just our economy, but a global economy. So we get it, we understand that, which is why it's important for us to understand to hear from you and understand what it takes in order to help us all get to the next level. So I'll pause there and just say thank you for the opportunity. We do hope to do more of these types of things where we are hearing and listening. We don't have all the answers. We're not here to make a promise that we got a magic wand to wave, but we will tell you this, that we stand together. We are community. We will work together because as you're better, I'm better, we're better, communities are better, and that's what we're focused on. So I'll pause there, and I guess at this point, Mark, it's your show.
Well done. Thank you, Ken. And again, thank you, Skip, for being such a great host and, more importantly, a great board member and a great leader for all of us. So thanks for all that you do 7 days a week. I also want to give proper shout out to my right hand, Kay Anderson, our Director of Operations, filmographer this evening, but it takes a lot of people, and oddly enough, it's really just the two of us or two and a half of us who do it, and I couldn't do it without you. Now, it's funny, you mentioned it's Anderson's, and Kay's last name is Anderson.
You my dad's name.
It's like the Maury Povich show.
I did not know that. He's got good. No, that's awesome.
Isn't that nice after all these years? Okay, let's bring it back. So what we'll do is I'm going to start with the first question. Since we are filming and we're going to be sharing this with both the chamber members and our district, please come to the mic so we can record you. Mark, I put you down for several questions. Little Mark Goldstein from Bala has several tonight. I look forward to these events. But I'm going to start with the first one, if you don't mind. We were kind of talking about it a little bit. Are you sure? Yeah, I got you. This is my best side. So, the electoral process that we're coming into, and I think it's probably as unprecedented as I can remember it, being a Politico and everything, with so many people running for mayor and so many people running for city council, and certainly with what the chamber does and trying to walk the tightrope of working with those folks and also advocacy. How do you handle the year that's coming up?
That's an easy question.
Oh, good.
It's the mic's on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. We started as a chamber by trying to decide, and by the way, our chamber had not been involved in electoral politics before, really. There were a couple little things that we had gotten involved with a couple years ago, but not really in a big way. And I will tell you, this is probably the wrong year to try and go all in on electoral politics. But we also looked at the situation and said, you know what, we have to do something this year. It's a moment for Philadelphia. We are at a precipice where we really need to understand and decide and try and bring the city, influence the elections in the city so that we have a business-friendly climate. So what are we doing? Our board last summer decided that they wanted to examine whether or not they wanted to do issues-based advocacy or candidate-based advocacy. Big difference, right? With issues, you're focused on education and making sure that voters, candidates, and others understand what is important to business. Candidate-based advocacy is where you choose one candidate over another. And sometimes you get into, saying not so good things about candidates or taking positions against others. What our board decided was that for the chamber itself, we would do issues-based advocacy, because we ultimately are going to have to work with whoever gets elected into office. Now, we also have a PAC. We have a political action committee. That PAC, which is also the chamber, can take and will take positions with candidates. And we'll do that by giving to candidates that have a demonstrated record or promises to support businesses, and also by doing assessments of candidates. But the chamber itself is doing issues-based advocacy, and what we're doing for that is we're trying to make sure that the electorate in Philadelphia, especially those that may be predisposed to understanding and supporting the business climate and the business world, that they understand how the source for the solution for poverty lies in part by growing business. That the source and the solution to crime lies in part by supporting and growing businesses. And it's all about trying to educate folks so that they can see the connections that are not always 100% obvious. Some of the things that I say is like, how are you going to pay for all this, right? Unless you have businesses that can ultimately help to create jobs to support families, number one, and businesses themselves that can help pay taxes to help support the programs that the city has. But at the end of the day, we as the chamber are taking positions on tax reductions. BERT, one of the biggest cities in the country that double taxes its businesses. And we had the first, by the way, I see you're lifting your hands up, the first change to the BERT tax in decades last year. The first reduction to the wage tax in years. We are doubling down. We have asked the mayor, and he said at our luncheon just a couple weeks ago that he would support additional reductions in the 5-year plan for both of those taxes. We think that's important because we want to make sure it gets into place before whoever gets elected into office, that they have to actually take action to change it instead of continuing on the work that we're doing here. And, fingers crossed, we'll be able to continue to make progress. But again, issues-based advocacy, not candidate-based advocacy. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, if I could add, I'll add to that. So digging a little deeper into the issues-based. So as I said before, community. So what are the things that are barriers to business? And so one of the things that we've done is actually two things. So the first thing is that we recognize that we've got to be collaborative. So there's an initiative that we have with the other chambers of commerce where we are coming together collectively to address issues-based things that help businesses. As an example, which is my number 2, let's figure out how to make it easier to do business in Philadelphia, if you will. So L&I, those conversations about, how many hoops, the bureaucracy, if you will, easy for me not to say, but the hoops that you have to go through as you're trying to run your business, whether it's taxation, whether it's licensing, whether it's, taking time out of your day. Again, many entrepreneurs are at different levels. Some people don't have the time to spend all day in Center City trying to address a particular issue that could be, resolved like that via an app or using technology as a result. So we're looking at ways to figure out how to do business easier. And then that goes back to what Chellie was talking about earlier, which is one of our pillars, and that is attracting business. So we got to take care of the folks that are here, the businesses that are here. We also have to create an atmosphere where businesses want to come to Philadelphia. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach in terms of those issues. So I just wanted to sort of amplify or build on what Chellie just laid out.
So can I ask a question of you?
Please.
What are your biggest issues? Because I really want to listen. So what things worry you about growing and expanding your business? What issues do you want to see the chamber involved in as we lean into the elections? What's important to you?
Quiet now. Hey, over here. Come on up.
He told me I had to ask a question or discuss it. So, I've been doing business in the city with businesses with under 100 employees it'll be 35 years soon. So, you mentioned Mayor Kenny. I'm going to tie a couple things in. A lot of what he feels or represents, I don't agree with. Whatever he says, I'm probably the opposite. But the one thing that he did try to initiate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember the full history, but pre-K was a push of his. And I have a client that has since retired, but she ran a nonprofit in Center City that was tied into education. And she was on that he had an initial group of 4 or 5 people, forgive my back. And I don't know if that's been discussed or not, but what I'm tying in with is a few years ago, I guess it was right before the pandemic, there was talk of, was it Google was looking to open up another location, and we were on the list as a city, but obviously we didn't get that. And I think if you look at a scenario like that and why they didn't pick Philadelphia, and what were the negatives that we didn't get it, and you try to turn the negatives into a positive. I'm tying in politics with this too, and with Kenny's idea with pre-K, that's a long-term thing. So when you're saying what can we do, I don't know. I know you're 7 months in the position, and I don't know if 7 years you'll be in the same position, but I think that if the business community, especially the chamber members that actually have deep pockets, because if you have a member that's here in Fishtown and they have 3 employees on the books, they probably can't write a check for thousands of dollars to invest in the youth of the city. But if you want to make Philadelphia more attractive, you have to make its people more attractive. And there are a lot of young people in this city, and you have to start somewhere, but I'll just say they're 1, 2, 3 years old and they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance. The kids that are maybe growing up in Center City, they're going to go to private schools and things like that. They have a chance, and the parents will probably move out to the suburbs. But I think the biggest thing we could do as a city, and the business community really should be spearheading it, or at least partnering with whoever the mayor is, and I would make this an issue, is to me the education of the youth of the city. It's a 10-year project. But if you invest in a 2-year-old today, a 3-year-old, in 10 years, you have a 13-year-old who wants to go to college and wants to be somebody. And maybe they've had a good experience, and maybe they want to go to a local school, and maybe if they're not local or they are local, they want to stay in Philadelphia. And that's what makes cities attractive. And that's what makes bigger businesses then want to come in and be members of your chamber. Because is Google a member? I don't know. I don't know. What would the fees be for their dues? Probably pretty high. So everybody wins. And to me, one of the issues that I would bring into play, if you're going to get into the issues with who's running for mayor, is I have some opinions. I don't want to say too much, but I would want somebody that wants to invest in the youth of the city, because that will spur business, because it'll make the city attractive. You'll have businesses from the outside come in, and if you look at the geography of this city, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. There was an article like in the late 80s in Philadelphia Magazine. I was just out of school, and what I got out of it, of course I didn't have any money, was invest in real estate right around 30th Street Station. Why 30th Street? because we're going to have high-speed trains, which really hasn't panned out, and we happen to be located between Boston, New York, D.C., and Baltimore. We're right in the middle. We have everything to offer geographically because we're south of New York City, we're north of D.C., the nation's capital, and I think personally by not investing in our youth and giving them opportunities to get educated and up to speed really, really well, I think that's a lot of what's holding us back, separate from the wage tax, which I do think is a major issue. I come from a background in the insurance industry. All the insurance agencies moved out of the city years ago because they don't want to pay city wage tax. The industry itself has changed, but you lost a lot of people that made nice livings, and they don't go out for lunch, and they don't pay for parking each month and pay city wage taxes and all. So to me, you know, I would target business, but also it's long-winded. I target the youth. And I think that's a good selling point that politicians could relate to.
Yeah,
you get buy-in from them.
Point taken. I think you're spot on. And we have there was a position that was added in the chamber a couple of years ago that solely focuses on workforce development. And so, you know, we are involved in workforce, developing the workforce of the future. So looking at kids in school, providing internship opportunities through member businesses, and getting involved in the schools. I'll turn it over to Ken in a second because he does a lot of that work. The whole way up through retraining and getting the right skill sets to adults so that they can become employees that can earn a family-sustaining wage. So there are a number of programs. We'll send those to you, Mark, after this meeting so that you can see some of the involvement. Citizens Bank is an organization that is deeply involved and invested in this. And, you know, so if any of you would like to provide internship opportunities or those sorts of things, we can talk. But I'll let Ken maybe describe one or two of the programs that we have going on right now.
Yeah. So real briefly, just to sort of build on that. So it is literally that 10-year investment. So there's a focus on middle school as a point of entry to reach kids, if you will, in addition to the spectrum of, you know, ages. But there's been some doubling down, if you will, on middle school. So as you mentioned, we have a couple of members who give money, you know, to the supporting of a program that we used to call Future Ready. But it really is our partnership with the School District of Philadelphia and middle schoolers. And it's really, the best way I can say it is, it's built on the premise of if a kid can see it, he or she can be it. And so it's really a partnership where we have our members who will come into the schools. They will talk with the kids, sort of expose them to their businesses, and then it culminates with the kids actually going to the businesses themselves. So they get out of the classroom, in some cases, we've heard stories where, you know, the trips were the first time that kids are out of their actual neighborhoods. So it's that impact and investment that, to your point, and I love how you laid it out, you know, that 10-year investment. All of a sudden, this 13-year-old or plus now wants to stay in Philadelphia, maybe open a business in Philadelphia, wants to work, and it improves, again, our talent as well as attracting other companies and businesses to the area. So, yeah, that's just one of the many things that we're trying to get members to continue to do. And I'll say this before we leave. I think one of the things that we can do, and this is part of why we wanted to hear from you, is we at the Chamber recognize the power of telling the story. So there are a lot of you who are doing a lot of great things that people just maybe don't know about. And so part of what we've said that we need to be more in tune with and adapted doing is telling the stories. Because if you tell somebody and give them an example, they may say, hey, well, I can do that too. And so the more the merrier kind of thing.
Yeah, hi. I just want to say, Skip Schwarzman here. Thanks for coming to doing this. I think it's a great program on the part of the Chamber's part. And to tie a couple of these things in, I want to point out first that while I think it'd be great as a business person for our business taxes to be lower, the fact is that the city's strapped for cash, and there's only so much available. The last I knew, Philadelphia was the largest city in the country that is its own county. And unlike other large cities of our size and larger, we don't have the wealthy suburbs and their tax base feeding the services that our city has to provide for its residents. So wealthier suburbanites come in, they work in Philadelphia, they are paying a city wage tax, but their local taxes don't support the city at all. So as fine as it is to say that the city wage tax is a burden, and it is, I recognize it, we also have to recognize that the city is not benefiting the way other large cities do from wealthy suburbs, and we're suffering because of that. With that in mind, and in terms of talking about what Mark was saying about investing in the future and workforce development, what I'm wondering is, what is the Chamber's position, if any, on the court's ruling that the funding of education in Pennsylvania, the distribution of funding is unconstitutional, which in the long run should bring more funds into the Philadelphia School District. And I realize that the budgets are not exact, it's not all under one umbrella in Philadelphia, but it should bring more money into Philadelphia, which not only will be an investment in the children that are in the schools, but also if you want to attract Google here or other large businesses, another thing that's going to attract them is going to be public schools for the children of the adults who move to Philadelphia to work here. So it's a two-pronged thing. It's an investment in the children. It's also an investment in the immediate workforce if we have a school system that is operating at a much greater level than the one is today, which is struggling in many areas. So I'm wondering what the Chamber's position is in this, if it has one, and what the Chamber can do in order to move the next process of how those monies are going to be distributed more equitably so that Philadelphia can benefit.
Yeah, really good question. So there's a lot that we don't know yet about how things are going to get worked out, right? First is that we don't know if this is going to stand up under appeal, because it will certainly be appealed by certain groups. We think overall it's a really good thing for Philadelphia if it stands, and we've already reached our hand out to the state to say that we want to help with the formulation of new formulas on how the funding would come. We think it ultimately is going to be a good thing for Philadelphia, and our schools desperately, desperately need it. I do want to address your comment about the wage tax, and by saying just really two quick things. One is that, one of the things that resonated with City Council and the diverse chambers who we partnered with when we were lowering the wage tax is that doing that, yes, it gave a break to a lot of the suburbanites who come in and work in the city, but it also gave a pay raise to Philadelphians. And that's a pretty big deal. We are, you talked about us being, the largest city for, I can't remember what, we're also the largest city that has the highest poverty rate in the country. And so when you look at a lot of the economics behind that, it comes down to the denominator. It's how much money people are making. So giving Philadelphians a raise was a big deal. Second comment I would just say is that having a lower wage tax, ultimately, we've done a couple of studies, we think will ultimately grow the economy to the point where it can start to pay for itself. The incremental decreases to those taxes are very, very small. I think it's 71 million maybe for this year, which in a $5 or $6 billion annual budget is peanuts. And if we can spur economic growth, which we believe is the case that we've seen in other communities, we think that ultimately those reductions can help to pay for themselves. But it is a concern. I mean, I don't want to discount what you said. I worry about that too. I live in Philadelphia. I live in South Philly. And, I worry about services and things being able to be paid for. But at this moment in time, I think we're also, it's a good opportunity. We have some federal relief funding that came in during COVID in the city that can help cushion that for the first couple years, and hopefully we'll see some growth afterwards that'll help to justify the continued reduction.
Thank you, Chellie. And Skip, to touch on the education part a little bit, certainly in my prior life in the House of Representatives, dealing with budgets and the Philadelphia school budget has been a big deal since we can remember. And I think, at least the last time I checked, the Commonwealth provides 50% at least of the school district's budget, several billion with a B. I think the next highest is 30-some%. in some of the other counties. I think the problem that there's also it's a bigger problem, obviously, is one of the things that we certainly saw when we were up there was almost this automatic animus in state government against Philadelphia. You're always coming back to us, Philadelphia, to fix your financial problems, whether it's sales tax, whatever it may be. And a lot of the things, you think about it, Philadelphia is the only, or maybe Philadelphia, Allegheny County, other counties have elected school boards where there's an extra tax, which is why you see there's different types. Those schools tend to flourish. The problem is there's no one answer. I would never want to say that there's probably never enough money for education, but there's a lot of it. And I think we always want to dig down deep, and hopefully this court opinion will help. How is that money being spent, and is it being spent in the most effective ways?
I'll just say one other thing. My background is in finance. I'm a CPA. I came up through the aviation world in the world of finance. And honestly, I don't think in Philadelphia we're going to make a dent in the school funding until we overhaul the entire tax system. Relying on wage tax and some of the structures that we have today without property tax as a basis for that is really, it's not a long-term solution for us. I don't know how we do that. That's something that, hopefully we can get smarter people than me to figure out, but I think that's going to have to be part of the solution, is a complete overhaul of the tax system.
Did you have a question?
Each year we get a number of requests from nonprofit organizations about the Neighborhood Assistance Program that's funded through the state, but it's a great way for businesses to get tax credits. I think it's anywhere from 55 to 85%. Curious to know if the Chamber has any sort of matchmaking program in connection with the Neighborhood Assistance Program, or what is your overall stance on the NAP?
Yeah, I'll take that. It is a great resource. So our daily challenge, I'll say daily on purpose, is to make those connections. So the Chamber, we see our role as convening folks and really sort of matching resources, because we don't have the resources necessarily ourselves, but we try to do a good job of matching. So with that being said, the particular fund, what we've done is we don't have a direct sort of in, if you will, with that particular fund, but we do partner with a number of other stakeholders, nonprofits that really speak to investing in folks that way. So when I think about economic development and helping businesses to grow, as an example, the Enterprise Center comes to mind, where we partner with them, and that's sort of wraparound capacity building services. There's also the work that we do with our CDFIs and banks that, I don't know if you all are familiar with, I guess the GRIT Fund is how it was first announced in the public, but there are banks who have made a concerted effort to pool monies together that are sort of earmarked for these types of initiatives to help folks grow. So it's an indirect sort of touch that we have, always looking to see how we can do that better, and so we're always open to it. So that's basically our position on it, if you will. Yeah.
Everybody know what CDFIs are? Yeah, thank you.
You want to say that again?
So Jennifer? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You saw a lot of those really pop up and become prominent during the pandemic with the PPP loan.
Yep.
A lot of them impact services, which is in our neighborhood. The impact fund stepped up. Of course, all our banks, etc.
There are 11. Yeah, so the structure is interesting. So locally there are 11, but similar to the business improvement districts, they have an alliance. So we work with the Pennsylvania CDFI. Varsovia Fernandez is helping to run that and in partnership with us. And a number of our initiatives We work through them. Also, there's an organization Vested In is one of those. And our very own PIDC, which is also considered a CDFI, is another great resource where this is an opportunity for businesses at various maturation stages can go to for, capital, for resources that, again, help them get to that next level.
Do you all know how the chamber is involved with PIDC? So when PIDC was formed more than 60 years ago, it was a private-public partnership between the City of Philadelphia and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. And the city has appointees on the board of directors for PIDC, as do I, as the president and CEO of the chamber. And we actually have more members on the executive committee and more appointees than the city does. The reason for that was to make sure that business had a strong voice and that it could help to depoliticize some of the work that PIDC does on behalf of the city. So we have a very, very strong relationship with PIDC, and it's actually one of the pieces of work that I'm most proud of that we're able to do. So.
And I'll also add, too, if you don't know about them, get to know about them. So the way I think about it is they get the money and they give out the money. And in terms of resources for businesses, again, where it is appropriate, depending on, how mature your business is and what the need is, they are the resource that get a lot of things done. And so, knowledge is power. And so I would say that's also what the chamber is sort of purposed to do. We connect folks, we share and amplify and educate. And so I would encourage anyone that's not maybe taking a look at PIDC to check it out.
Thank you, guys. Do any of you have any other questions? I have two, but I know the night is running along and I want to respect your time. These are easy questions. Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
So one of our great tavern owners, Brendan, who owns the St. Lazarus, we love him. Nightlife has its own vibe and its own concerns, whether it's public safety, things of that nature. And I know we have a new nightlife commissioner. How is the chamber involved with this new position?
Yeah, Mr. Raheem Manning. He's we called him at first the Nightmare, but he was like, nah, don't call me the Nightmare. It's too close to nightmare. But he has, literally he said that. He is purpose with really, and I think we talked a little bit about this before we came into this room, where he's really trying to take a look at how to make Philadelphia Center City a 24-hour business. And it wasn't lost on me, the reply or comment to that is that could be a good thing, but maybe not so much. I mean, there's considerations whenever you are 24 hours. There's the safety piece. There's the, getting folks home who overindulge. And I think you were sharing with me a story of, someone who maybe had a little bit more to drink. As someone who owns a bar, you don't really know, the status of someone walking in. You can cut them off at a certain point, but at that point, there are things out of your control. But yet when they leave your establishment, you've got a level of responsibility. So, that was a good thing to hear and to have him consider. But we partner really strongly with the Commerce Department, which is where that position sits under. And so we have a very strong partnership with the City of Philadelphia and the Commerce Department to make Philadelphia and nightlife better and to attract. But I want to transition, if I might. So with that being said, imagine this. In a few years, some good stuff is going to be happening right here in Philadelphia. We got all this stuff coming. We got soccer, MMA, Philadelphia, we are about to get the spotlight put on us. And so what does that mean for business owners? I want to hear from you. With that being as a backdrop, what is it that you would say in response to this? How do we get ready? How do we get you ready? How do we get ready for the world stage? Before I say that, or before I really want to hear from you all, I also want to kind of tell you what the chamber has done. So my colleague, Kate Sullivan, is sitting in the back. And Kate, raise your hand. She's an amazing person, powerhouse, who has decided to take on the challenge, and I think we're all going to be better for it, for creating a cleaner, safer, and greener Philadelphia. Now, again, that's a big charge, and I don't want to overpromise, but I think what I wanted to leave everyone with, the business community, is that we are trying to position ourselves for the world stage, and we recognize that this city has to be safer, it has to be cleaner, it has to be conducive to doing business, and so you all are the economic engine, as I said before. So I would love to hear, I don't know, Kate, if you even want to say a couple of things about it, but I would also love to hear from you all as to what you think it takes for us to be ready, for you as business owners to be ready for that.
Been here for 10 years. And I like what everyone's had to say so far. I have a couple things I just want to say quickly. You guys are absolutely right about us focusing on young people, but they have to be our young people. I don't want to worry about people that are moving their kids in from New York or anywhere else. And I'm going to make this part short. It's impossible to do that if you're not doing the same for their parents. If there isn't, my main issue this year has been these tax increases on property taxes. My property taxes doubled on my business, doubled on my home. I paid this year $20,000 in property taxes. $20,000, right? I was closed for 14 months because of the pandemic, because I was trying to do the right thing in the name of public safety. I took a huge hit, and I'm still trying to recover from it. We jumped through every hoop. Every requirement that's asked of us from PLCB all the way down to the city, I don't play any games, and it costs me a lot of money to operate that way, right? And I sometimes feel like small businesses like ours aren't rewarded in any way for that. The burden's solely on our backs. I watch these massive corporations pay no taxes, right? And here I am, like, when I see this much, in cash, and then by the end of the night it's this much, I have a family to feed. I own my house. I'm a good citizen. My point is that, if you want kids to have a chance, their parents have to have a chance. There are a lot of people that I've owned my house at Second and Master for 20 years. When I first moved there, it looked entirely different than it does now. People don't talk to each other, don't say hello. They're rude. There's no camaraderie. There's nothing neighborly about most of the people that are there now. It's fine. But the reality is most of the people that left didn't leave because they got a fortune for their homes and they left because they were taxed out of their homes, right? They own their homes that may have been generational with no mortgage, raised families, and all of a sudden they can't afford, the taxes like a mortgage. They have no education on how to manage equity, right? They're taken advantage of by people that come in and say, I'll buy your house cheap. All right, you buy my house cheap. I'll give you $100,000 for a house that's really worth $4 or $5 or $6 or $700,000 on this market, right? You take it because you can't afford to stay there. Then what do you do with $100,000? What's that get you? Get you a worse situation in the same city, right? Now, how do you manage making sure that your kids are fine? If you can't be fine, that needs to be addressed. I'm a Democrat. I'm a social Democrat. I don't mind paying taxes. I understand. As long as I see that there's some reward for it. As long as I see that things are being done. So tell me where all the money goes if it's not going to places. I pay the sugar drink tax. Anyone that owns that's in hospitality knows how much it costs just to buy soda. A box of my syrup tripled in price, right? Okay, fine, if it's going to the right place. But where's it going? Why are we even having the conversation, right?
And I don't mean to interrupt you, I know we're time short. And we're going to get to your scenario in a second. We'll finish with that. Okay. I think what Brandon's asking is how, and especially an organization like the Chamber, how do you hold government officials accountable?
Yeah.
That's one question. And the other thing is that we're going to have a conversation about, making sure that, which I 1,000% agree with, making sure that our kids create an environment that brings revenue to the city, that brings eyes on the city in the future. We have to figure out how we can make sure that our kids are okay ourselves. And that's, you know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying that, I mean, taxing people out and not giving them any education on how to manage equity and how to deal with predatory, you know, buyers and lenders and all this, and them having zero understanding of the way things work, and that's certainly not the way to do it. There needs to be some focus on that. But that's, you know, that's as a resident.
Yeah.
As a business person, you know, we pay a ton of taxes again, you know, which is fine. But when we don't have enough police to police the neighborhood, and it puts a strain on things. When I call 911, I get a busy signal, and I'm at Front and Girard, which is like a hub, and it winds up being me and my security staff that have to, like, it's like the Wild West sometimes, right? Okay, like, where's my money going? You know, I can't get 311 to answer a phone call. I can get nothing ever, right? That's that. But, you know, and then you get to the last step, which is just to operate. You're talking about how do we bring businesses to the city, right? How do we streamline things? Why does it take me a year to get zoning so people can dance? Why does it take me a year and $50,000 so that people can park on a parcel that I took over that was literally littered with garbage and drug needles and everything else that I had completely torn down and paved and stoned and, like, have security on the lot? And then L&I shows up and, you know, okay, fair enough. Like, what do I need? I had to hire an attorney. It cost me $50,000 in a year just to have off-site parking and off-site garbage to relieve my neighbors of their park. How do we streamline things?
So
We'll be here till tomorrow morning, but you could.
well,
That's a great point. So thank you, Brendan.
And Brendan, I want to ask a question. I don't know if you'd be willing to do this, but I would love for you to tell your story officially on the record of what you're frustrated with.
I would love to.
Because that's the kind of stuff, when Ken said that we're putting together stories, we're literally putting together people telling stories in their own words about what is wrong with our local government, how we need to hold them more accountable, and what you need to survive and thrive as a business owner. And so if you and others would be willing to do that, I'd love to set you up with some communications folks to do that, because
I would love to do that.
I think you have a really compelling story, and I think you're exactly right.
And the truth of it is that without us, there is no economy here.
I agree.
Period.
You know,
Take away the bars, restaurants, and hospitality in the city, it's a goose egg.
Well, you make a really good point, too. We have a lot of, you talked about the big businesses that aren't paying taxes. We have a lot of universities and hospitals that don't pay taxes, which is fine, I guess. But, you know, when we don't have enough large tax-paying businesses in the city, that puts us at a disadvantage vis-a-vis other cities. And it's a real challenge. That's one of the things that we're trying to address when we do business attraction. But I just want to get back to the basis, which is, I think you have a really compelling story to tell, and if you'd be willing to do that, we'd love to help. Yeah, thanks.
I will jump in quickly here with one other thing, which is a program that I think the Chamber could conceivably take on in line with what Brendan's talking about. All of us here who are in businesses have stories, which we may, horror stories of dealing with the city, which you referenced to earlier, Sherry, about the difficulty, or maybe you said it, Ken, about, and we all have them. And it's great for us to relate them to the politicians via the Chamber or without the Chamber, except that so frequently what happens in that situation is that they hear a story and they don't hear both sides of it. They don't hear the city employee's side of it, whoever we might happen to be dealing with. It's very easy for them to say that when Skip Schwarzman comes to them and tells them the story, Skip was a pain in the ass, right? So here's the program for the Chamber.
Yeah.
Every mayoral candidate who says yes goes through some city process with the Chamber anonymously. Let them try and get a license. The people who are running for mayor haven't
That's a
done that
good
kind
idea.
of thing for a very long time. Every one of them, you offer them the opportunity, you set up a situation, chamber members can suggest routes for them to go through where they have experienced difficulty before, and let every one of those mayoral candidates spend a few hours waiting on hold for the revenue department. And then finding out that they have to call back later and speak to somebody else, or that they open up at 8 o'clock, or that they're answering phones at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're calling at 8:20 and you can't get through. Have them actually spend the time doing it and see what's involved.
I think that's a great idea.
And then they're going to understand what it is that's helping to impede the growth of business in Philadelphia.
So we're going to have mayoral forums at the end of March, where they're all going to come in and answer questions, and we'll ask them if they're willing to do that. By the way, dirty little secret, sort of, I guess, our airports are owned and operated by the city of Philadelphia. I was a city employee for 11 and a half years in working at the airports. And by the way, think about it this way. I was running a middle market company in the middle of city government. My board of directors was city council. I had to deal, when I had to pay bills, I had to deal with, the accounting and finance function, the Office of Finance downtown. I had to deal with the procurement rules. I understand. And I think Skip, your suggestion is spot on. I love it. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, I spend a good deal of our day. Part of what this will kind of lead to, getting back to you, what a bid does. I'm fortunate enough to be able to pick up the phone to call for our folks. Most don't have that function. Yeah. And that kind of leads to, I'm going to get back to prepping, kind of finish on this, because I think one of the things is, like, for example, we're a business improvement district. Our stakeholders pay to be part of it. So you're already talking about people who are taxed to death and actually agree to do this because they're getting the services they're not getting. So we're able to do things to build hospitality, do our World Cup soccer event, which the Chamber was a sponsor. Thank you very much. And part of the reason was, besides bringing in kind of a new niche of people, we're prepping for 2026. So I think the thing that we want to make sure as a business community is, we always hear about, whether it's stadiums or whatever, how does it affect commerce? What jobs does it create? How will our businesses, and that's kind of okay, and I do, to make sure that they do going to our fine restaurants. We're going to be getting hotels where people will stay, and I think that's going to be the thing to really push then, is the infrastructure is there, runs smoothly, because let's be honest, you have a bad experience with the world here, we're never going to get it again. Yep. And on the flip side, make sure to involve that we are focusing things not just in Center City, that the whole city can benefit from this wonderful event. So that would be my 2 cents.
Okay, so noted. And again, I think I don't disagree. I think you're right. I think we have to look at, the experience that folks will have. We have to look at transportation. We have to look at access. We have to look at how do we leverage the assets that we have. I think someone said earlier, you think about the area. Philadelphia has some pretty decent assets as it goes in comparison to other places. And so we are set for the world stage. It's now we just have to make sure, just my opinion, I guess I'm at this point saying, but I think we just have to think about who we are and who we want to be and just execute on that. And I think, again, going back to what I said before as I started, it really is about community. And if we see ourselves as one community, again, as you do better, I do better. As I do better, we all do better. And so if we just kind of come together that way, I think, and really approach this from a business perspective of how we all get better, I think therein is sort of the secret sauce. And this is really our first, not our first, but this is an example of the business community representing the business community. And we've got over 1,500 members, or part of our chamber, which represents 600,000, we're saying twice, 600,000 employees, people that are employed. So that's pretty big. 3 states, the whole 9. I mean, you can Google the stats, if you will, but that's a pretty big deal that the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia has, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And we know, again, it really is about business, and business drives again, it's that economic engine. And so it's all of us working together to do that.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry, Mark. I got one more thing. I know you meant for that to be an ending point. It was
No,
so
no, that's
beautiful, too.
Closed it so perfectly. But go ahead, Kay.
But one of the things that we've alluded to a lot tonight but haven't really touched on specifically is the violence that our city is seeing. It's something that me as a festival organizer is one of the things that I deal with pretty head on. It's one of the biggest deterrents for people who are outside of Philadelphia to come into Philly and experience the tourism of Philly, and really is holding us back as being a regional destination across the board. And I personally don't necessarily feel like increasing, police budgets is necessarily the best solution for that. And I think that there's more creative ways that we can think and involve community in coming up with a solution. Public school funding would be a huge part of that, in my opinion. But I'd be curious to your guys' opinion as at the chamber and what you guys are thinking about in terms of that issue specifically.
We're both chomping at the bit because I know you want to talk about this very much.
So we are a founding member of what is called the Civic Coalition to Save Lives. It was just launched at the end of last year, but this is a data-based approach to getting involved in intervention in crime. I am not the expert in this program, but I can tell you that it's worked in places like Indianapolis, Oakland, California, and other places. And it's that intervention moment when something is truly happening, and taking a look at the 1,000 or 2,000 people who are most likely to commit a gun violence incident or be the victim of it, and intervene with those people. It can have an effect. It can dramatically reduce gun violence as one of the things, and it was one of the things that I heard about that actually gave me hope. It was kicked off by the Philadelphia Foundation and the William Penn Foundation. Sorry, two foundations. The premise is government can't do it alone. And there are a number of partners coming together to set up ways to monitor these and intervene with these folks and ultimately reduce crime. So one of the things that's going on, and we know that crime is it. We know that it has to be addressed.
And what I like about it too, real quick, and then please come. But what I'll just add to it, I think again the difference with this initiative is that they have identified short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. Right. So back to the point of the 10-year investment, which is awesome, that we need to do that. But there's also a priority to say, what's happening today, and how do we stop the next shooting, if you will, in this case. That's right. And so there's a lot of focus on, like Chellie just alluded to, let's figure out who are the folks who are most vulnerable, and let's intervene. And by the way, intervention doesn't mean arresting, to your point, necessarily. It could mean get this person a job. It could mean get them some training. It could mean get them a house. Maybe to your point, Brendan, earlier, take care of the parent or the household so that the kids have a different alternative. So they have an alternative other than to go shoot someone. So there's what I love about it is that we're trying to do this in a different way, and identifying those short-term, medium-term, and long-term sort of objectives and goals, I think is going to be the secret sauce of what makes it different.
What he said.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, based on what I'm hearing from everyone, I feel like a lot of times issues are being treated the symptom and not the cause. So I feel like if we try to just only treat the person who's shooting a gun or the violence, it's not fixing, it's a short-term patch, but to truly fix this problem, it is that long-term approach, and it's taking guys like this to want to stay here and open a business. It's taken a guy like me who has a super small business in the city and not wanting to quit year 5 because you get taxed and you're just trying to talk to somebody on the phone, and now you just write a check for 6 G's just to get rid of them so you don't get fined more the next year because you can't get somebody to help you. It's about making it a city. I grew up in the city. It's about making a place. I have a lot of pride in the city. All these guys do. It's about having pride in wanting to be here, and that's the cause to me, because I no longer feel in my heart that I love the city, that I want to be here. when I talk to other business owners, they go, "Oh, the city, it's a show." Everyone says that. It's a nightmare to deal with. So in a lot of the things, I think it's about a guy like this is taking all the risk, paying all the bills. He's trying. Like, he's trying to put in, he's the one we want here. He's the one that cares. He's the one fighting for the, you know what I mean? And when those people aren't rewarded and there's friction, eventually those people quit or move. And I know you guys know that. I know I'm not saying anything revolutionary, but I guess it's just an approach. I think it really matters in taking that long-term approach and not trying to just patch it real quick and get to really what's the cause. And I think that's trying to make frictionless for really small businesses like me, so you're not overwhelmed. So a small business, you know, I've many times said, that's great, like the American dream to start a business, but like it's too much. Like a big business can do that because they got lawyers and they have all these things, but like, right, and they don't pay taxes. So they have all the rewards, and I understand that. That is important. Like, to have these businesses here for jobs, I understand what that can bring from an economic environment on the other side, but maybe those two things need to be treated differently, or maybe there needs to be, like everyone keeps saying it, if something's hard to use, people stop using it, whether it's a technology or an app or whether it's the city. And I think over the last 20 years, in everyone's heart, it's just like, city's a mess. And I think that makes good people leave. And when good people leave, there's not community, there's not pride and ownership and all that stuff. So I think it all feeds on itself. And I think it starts with the cause, not the symptom.
Yeah. Well said. So listen, I'm going to try and just bring this home. I truly appreciate all of you speaking from your hearts and your experiences. That means a lot to us. I do want to tell your stories, whether you tell it personally or whether I tell it for you with names omitted so that you don't get labeled. I think that's really important. And I just want to end by saying I've learned a lot this evening. Actually listening to your story, to you talk about your experiences means a lot, and will ultimately make us a better chamber so that we can prioritize our work and do what you need us to do. We are working hard. We're trying to make Philadelphia better. I love this place. I could have gone and run another large airport. I didn't want to leave Philadelphia. So here I sit. And I don't think there's any bigger honor than being able to serve the business community in this city, in this region. And if nothing else, please walk away knowing that people like Ken and me and Kate and James and Dion are working really hard to make it a better place for you to operate. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you again, Chellie. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
It's been a great night. I want to thank you and the rest of the chamber. You have been wonderful partners throughout our entire membership. Know that because the chamber is a member, you stakeholders are with us. So the conversation doesn't end tonight. Keep in contact with me. We will keep in contact together. They've been fortunate. I've been fortunate that they let me be a voice for us in different safety conversations. We will continue to do that, but at least now there's open, frank dialogue. If nothing else, shows how much you all and how much we all care about the city that we call home and that we work in and own business in, and we want to thrive here, and we're going to do that. So on behalf of the Fishtown Business Improvement District, thank you for your time. Thank you, Chamber. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.